Good day, and welcome to our presentation on ISO 9001-2015. I'm Dennis Hutton, one of IMSM's auditor/consultants. Today we're going to be very quickly going over the very basics of ISO 9001, just to give you an idea of the pros and cons of it, and maybe a little history, and go over some of the standards, I guess. So again, the big trick here is if your company is doing well and you're concentrating on some of the things, introducing ISO into the system and being certified to it will make your company do even better. It will streamline things, and within a number of months you'll be saying this really does work. That's what I usually find. It's an interesting world. The standard's been changing and adapting ever since its beginning in 1987. All standards, including ISO 9001, are to be reviewed once every 5 years, which usually ends up about 7 years because it takes a few years for all the countries that are involved to agree on the wording. So the thing comes out, and there's usually some adjustments made to any documentation to match the new standard. The last revision to the ISO 9001 was in 2015, which was a fairly major change, actually. It moved to something called an Annex SL system format, and the ISO decided that they would change all of the standards that were upcoming into this new Annex SL. So 14,001, 45,001, and a number of others all have the same format now. Now we're talking about ISO. ISO is the International Standards Organization. They're based out of Geneva, Switzerland, and they're the secretariat for all the ISO standards that exist. That's pretty well their job. Each of the countries has a committee, which are usually called TC176, that feeds in advice for the document to be altered or fixed or adjusted, made more modern. It's a little bit of trivia, but the standard is called ISO 9001 and ISO 14001. ISO is a Greek word meaning equals. And so it's a lot of people make a mistake and call it ISO 9001, but it's actually ISO. So that's in order to adjust for all the different languages that the standard is in, so that the number remains the same. So that's your little trivia for the day, just in case. Another weird change when they went to the Annex SL is they stopped using the words document and records. They moved over to a single set of words called documented information. Now, the only way you can tell which that is the word before it. If it says maintain documented information, it's a document. If it says retain documented information, it's a record, what we know as a record. Not a big change, and it's usually the documentation that's produced for businesses uses the words document and records because we can, and it makes it kind of easier to understand. So that's a bit more trivia. So today we're going to go over the different parts of the standard. So we're going to look at the process approach, which has been the quality management system since the beginning. They've always tried to sell a process approach to everything in the company, which is fairly simple once it gets going, but it's a bit daunting in the front. We're going to look at the management principles that the QMS is built on. There's another little bit of trivia. We're calling it the quality management system, which is what it originally was named. There was a small movement a couple of years ago to change the word to business management system, because truly that's what it is. If your business is running well, the business goes well, and the end product has high quality. So, but it remained as QMS. So that's what we've got. We're going to talk about the plan, do, check, act methodology. We're going to talk about management principles. We're going to talk about clause structure, and where does IMSM fit in here. So with that, we'll go to an overview of ISO 9001. It's, as I say, it's an international standard that sets minimum requirements for a company's quality management system. So the one of the big changes in 2015 was that ISO 9001 does not require a manual any longer. It relies on you to decide what documents you need and document them there for your company. So it's become a lot less prescriptive. ISO 9000 had quite a reputation as being a real cumbersome piece of literature in the old days, particularly in the 90s. It was a tougher thing, but it's become less prescriptive, which is a good thing for companies to get going on, and then they can enhance it as they go. So we should note that the QMS can be applied to all types and sizes of organizations, either in products or service-based, and includes processes for continual improvement all of the time, no matter what system, what kind of company you are. But it can be basically used in any company, any style of company. So the ISO management system adopts a process approach. This is a process to transform inputs into outputs. Now, this could be as simple as ordering equipment from a vendor and working on it in the shop, and then the output is the completed product at the back. It can also be down to a low level or a higher level, I suppose, where you would say, here is this machine, it makes this output, it does this, and the output goes to the input of the next part of the process. So it's that kind of thing. Organizations have to determine and manage numerous linked activities, and that's got to do with the processes being linked together. An output from one process often forms the input to the next. So that's what we were talking about, the different processes. So that's more dramatically described in our plan, do, check, act emblem here. You'll notice that in the different chunks, there's the number of the clause that we're going to be looking at in the document itself. Right in the center is clause 5, leadership and commitment. Of course, that's the center of this whole thing. Management has to be on side with this and be able to work with it. Then it goes into clause 6 to do the planning. 7 and 8 are the support and operations. 9 is where you evaluate how well the system is doing and the product is doing. And then number 10 looks at improvements. And that at number 10 is where the non-conformance talk is about. And then you go into replanning if necessary, sort of thing. So it's this diagram has been in use for many years now, with different clause numbers, of course. So the management principles are listed there. There's 7 of them. And we'll just run them quick here. Customer service, of course, you're wanting to satisfy your customers for their requirements. Leadership, top management, and all the leaders down the line have to exemplify good practices and a desire for a high quality product. Engagement of people, of course, the leaders from the top management all the way down to the supervisor on the floor or whatever, and it needs to keep their employees engaged and competent. So the process approach, of course, we talked about that. Improvement. One of the other small changes in the document in the 2015 version, they changed the word from continuous improvement to continual. And there's a reason for that, but now the word is continual. So we need to be continually improving the quality management system to make it more efficient, better. Evidence-based decision making. It's meant to be based on real facts, real product, and so that the right decision can be made. And management should be related to each of the different sections, and so the relationship management and the product management. One of the little things I'll throw in again as trivia is that one of the statements used to be a lot was that ISO 9000 was a management tool for construction, people who were making things in shops. But it's meant to be for every kind of in any kind of company, and that can be service companies, inspection companies, where they're not making a manufactured product. The reason the manufactured product thing got mentioned so much was that for us, when we were describing a process that people should use, we would go to a hard kind of example, like a machine shop or an assembly shop sort of thing. So that's where it got that reputation. Okay. So this is the basically the level, the high level structure of Annex SL. Now the first ones are kind of extra stuff. They're information for people to have. The scope, the normative, the terms, they're kind of getting into the standard itself. The standard itself starts on clause 4, the context of the organization. And that's where it's talking about how does the company relate to this list of people. Then we go from the context. Now and again, in the context of the organization is a number of documented informations that are required. An interested party document, a scope, and the scope is a maintained documented information. It's a document that has to exist. And the internal and external issues, where you investigate how you deal with different vendors and like that. Okay, so that's context of the organization. Number 5 is leadership. Leadership is the section that replaced the old management responsibilities, which is not listed that way anymore. The real thing is leadership, where top management has to lead the company and keep selling and do better, sort of thing. So then there's documented information that's required in there. The one maintained documented information, of course, is a quality policy. Quality policy is a fairly extensive document now. It used to be fairly simple, and it was supposed to be, and this is in the 80s and 90s, it was supposed to be a short, meaningful little statement that the people in the shops, there's the example again, would be able to memorize. And one we might know would be quality is job one. That statement has hung on to that company until about 5 years ago, when they changed it to something else. But the statement was quality is job one, and of course that was the Ford Motor Company. It was written by a consultant named Phil Cosby. We're not sure how much he was paid, but probably quite a bit for that, and it lasted a long time. So, but now the quality policy is more meant to be kind of how the system is built, sort of thing. And it's got to mention things like continual improvement and reviews and such. Beyond that, in leadership, there's a documented information required called the organizational chart, which shows the relationships between the departments. Okay. Clause 6, there we go. Clause 6 is where we implement actions to address risks and opportunities. One of the big additions through this Annex SL was They're asking companies to look at the risks and the opportunities meeting the company so that they can be warned and they can come up with mitigating procedures to make sure it doesn't hurt them too bad. Most people are now adding pandemics. Who would have thought of such a thing? But that's the challenge, is to think of the things that may affect you and you may want to deal with. Quality objectives and planning to achieve them. Quality objectives are meant not to be about money and increasing your profits or whatever. They're meant to say, we're going to improve our delivery system. Well, a good example I use every now and again is we're going to increase our on-time delivery to 95%. And again, that it's close to a manufacturing thing again, as I said, but it's also, it can be used even in an inspection company where they're on time for the inspection. And planning for change, which is what businesses do, but it's usually driving to work in the morning. You think about it on the highway and you deal with it when you get there. But they want people to sit down and really plan for the changes. So in this document, in this section, we need some documented information, a risk registry for one, and a document with quality objectives. Now, both the quality objectives and the policy I spoke about a minute ago need to be produced, signed. They need to be posted in various places so that the workers can know that it exists. They don't need to memorize it, but they should know that it's there, and it should be explained to them every now and again that we're trying to do these things. Number 7, support. And support is the infrastructure, the environment, and the resources necessary for the organization to work. So this is to determine competency and training requirements for the staff. Competency is the step beyond training. Like, the training was held, but didn't get competent from it. And to build awareness of the quality management system through the organization and ensure the documented information required by this standard is collected and controlled. So this requires documented information like calibration register, because in there is the monitoring and measuring equipment is in that 7.1.5. If it is required. There's a couple of segments of the standard that can be excluded if the company does not do it. Monitoring and measuring equipment, and design and development. So if the companies absolutely do not use it, those two can be excluded, and those exclusions would be shown in the scope for the production. Okay. We require a training matrix or a training plan to show that these people are being trained regularly and what needs to be done. Training records. Each employee should have some sort of record that we're able to go over now and again and check to see if it's up to date. And IT and document security. The IT security is getting more and more serious now as we go. I received some weird spams this morning, just myself. So it's getting serious. And but the main thing with the documented information is that all documents have to be and records have to be controlled so that no obsolete documents can be put into use by accident. So that's an important part of the standard. Clause 8 is operations, and again, this is where it covers all the things that need to be done by the company. Traceability, to ensure that documented information is maintained, to demonstrate the product, fully document the design and development process. Now, this is the interesting part in here. All of the standards that I've mentioned, the 45, the 14, the 9, they're built the same way and they have the same clauses. Clause 4, 5, 6 are pretty well the duplicate. 8 is where things start to change. For instance, the design and development process is clause 8.3. In the 14,000 in one standard, though there is no 18 or 8.3, but there's an 8.2, which is not in the ISO 9000 standard. 8.2 in the 14,000 is emergency preparedness sort of thing. So you can see they match, but this is the one clause that kind of diversifies a little bit. Then you show that externally provided products and services controlled. So if you're a manufacturing unit again, you're starting with a product that's coming in the door from a vendor that you're going to build with or install in this unit. It has to be controlled and it has to be right. So that's where the external products and services comes in. Services could be an outsourced product. Maybe you don't do engineering, but you get some outsourced. That means you still have to include it. It's not an exclusion because you're responsible for it still. But that's an outsource. So you've got to control that also. So then the documented information for this section, the design and development process document, supplier and subcontractor evaluations, if you will, and an approved vendors list, which isn't a terribly big requirement for ISO 9000 any longer, but it used to be an important thing. Most people want to keep it because it helps with their evaluations. So clause 9, performance evaluation, it talks about KPIs. I like to differentiate KPIs and objectives, quality objectives. I look at KPIs as a dollar figure thing. So you're looking, this is where you evaluate how well your system is doing. And so in this section, you're planning and implementing an internal audit program. And the other important thing in this one is a clause that asks you to do a management review on a regular planned interval, which to me is a year. And that's where you go through, you sit down, top management goes through the ISO 9000 contents, everything, to see how well it's all working, so you know what you have to do to fix the next thing for the next year, sort of thing. So there's documented information that's required here: internal audit plan, internal audit checklists or reports, and for the last one, the management review needs a full set of minutes, which I generally find myself saying they need a little bit more meat, because these are meant to be read by somebody who may not have been there, so they have to be fairly full and lots of things described. Say rather just say we discussed the problem with NCRs. Well, we need to know what the discussion said, sort of thing. So it's a little more stringent than just we did do it. Clause 10 is the improvement part. It's got an improvement, opportunities for improvement is this, and it's most of this is coming out of the top management review. And then control and manage nonconformities. So that's your NCR program, or your CAR program. I generally give people a choice. Do you want to use NCRs, nonconforming reports, or do you want to use quality control report? And it makes it a little less negative, sort of thing. But it's still an NCR thing. So the required documentation for that is a list of improvement opportunities that you can come up with, the top management can come up with, and the NCR registry and all the NCRs that go with it. And again, the NCR is a very valuable part of the whole program. So that's where some big payback can happen in some companies. So where does IMSM fit in? IMSM is a company that's based out of the UK. They've worked with over 12,000 organizations globally now. I'm not sure how many are in Canada. It's coming up. for ISO 9000, probably 3,000, something like that. So it's quite popular, particularly in Alberta, where the oil field, a lot of the oil field companies are asking for ISO 9000 to be part of a vendor's program. And they're finding it works better for them. So, so in order to make this work, IMSM will have an initial consultation called a gap analysis, and a consultant will come to review your current system and highlight any areas that need attention. And it's not usually drastic attention, but it's just fine-tuning things to get it up to the ISO 9000 standard. Production of documentation, the IMSM helps with the forms, the manuals, where I mentioned that the manual is not required anymore, but just these maintained documented informations. But IMSM is still supplying manuals. For a company just getting going, it's the best way to do it. It explains things at length, and it's a beginner book, is what it is, and it helps. Plus, the templates and the forms for the different processes will come as part of the package there. And then after that, there's some time given for the company to implement everything. And that can be a month, it can be 3 or 4 months. If it gets down to be 4 months, then there's a good chance your consultant's going to be calling you and saying, you know, we've lost a little momentum here. Should we look at this again and help out, or what? So, and then there's a certification audit where if you're successful, that you end up with a certificate that's good for a year. And then yearly after that, there's a surveillance audit. And so that's what IMSM does. Basically, that's their function. And I usually tell people they specialize in small companies. We've done big ones too, but they specialize in smaller companies. So it's a great help that way. So questions, and we're not able to ask questions right on the spot here, but if anybody has questions that they need answered now, you could send me an email at my IMSM email address. So it's Dennis Hutton, all one word, at imsm.com, and that'll get you an answer back. And again, I love to talk about ISO 9000, obviously. If you want to argue about things, I love to argue about things to do with ISO 9000 too. So that'd be fine too. So I hope this has been informative, and I know you won't find that this whole process as difficult as you've been led to believe, for sure. And so, again, any questions, please email me, and thank you very much for attending.